If you have bought or thinking of buying a DJI Flip, then this video is for you, because I have uncovered a major flaw that I have found with this drone that dates all the way back to DJI's planning stage when they were speccing this drone, and it could potentially really affect the way that you fly this drone, or indeed potentially make you lose it. So let's get into it. Now, when I talk about the developing stage where DJI have made a mistake with this DJI Flip, what I mean is instead of using their usual omnidirectional vision system that we see on drones such as the DJI Mini 4 Pro or the Air 3 and Air 3S for example, this uses a 3D infrared sensor as its primary obstacle avoidance system. So what made DJI choose this system? Well, in the DJI Flip we have an infrared transmitter and receiver, and this system is absolutely perfect for measuring distances, especially in lower light conditions. Now, given the fact that this DJI Flip has got fully enclosed propellers, there's a huge chance you're going to fly it indoors where this lower light infrared sensing technology is really going to have a huge advantage. Now, it's not just the Flip that has these 3D infrared sensors. Drones such as the DJI Mini 4 Pro also use them as part of their downward vision positioning system to determine the distance when the drone is actually coming into land. So it is very, very useful for a lot of applications. Now, before I begin, I would just like to say that this DJI Flip so far in my testing has very much impressed me, so this is by far no means a bashing of this drone whatsoever. However, the problem I've encountered, I feel, is serious enough to warrant making this video on its own. So without further ado, let's get into the problems that I have found whilst going out creating some content to bring you my full review on this drone. So I was out flying along with my DJI Flip, capturing some content for my full review video. I was capturing some B-roll, I was doing some palm takeoffs, palm landings, and then of course demonstrating how you can use the DJI Flip without an RC controller whatsoever and using the mobile version of the DJI Fly app, and of course flying along capturing some hopefully awesome footage to demonstrate the camera capabilities of this new DJI drone. Now, whilst the weather was pretty clear, there was some fog rolling in and out. Now, I do understand that drones should generally not be flown in foggy conditions as detailed in the user manual, which is why I was continuing to fly below the fog, hopefully that it wasn't going to affect me capturing the footage I'd gone out to try and capture. Now, this is where I encountered problem number one, because if you look closely, I'm just trying to fly the DJI Flip down the side of this building to capture a nice fly-by shot. Now, don't get me wrong, in the frame and looking closely, you can see there is some visible mist coming in. However, I am pretty low, and for me there is just not enough fog that I would consider would interfere with this drone's flight whatsoever. However, I was incredibly wrong at this point, because as I tried to fly forwards, you could see the drone simply would not make any sort of forward momentum whatsoever. I tried changing direction, moving up, moving back down. I even resorted to try to switch between modes such as cine mode and normal, and no matter what I did, that drone was just like hitting an invisible wall in the sky. It appeared that the fog was actually interfering with the front infrared sensors on the DJI Flip, meaning it was detecting the fog as an obstacle, stopping us actually making any momentum forward, and resulted in the drone just being completely stuck in the air. It was at this point I thought pretty quickly, because in C mode or N mode, the obstacle avoidance sensors are active, meaning if it determines an obstacle, it's just going to brake as it was doing in this video. However, by switching to sport mode, that disables the action of the braking when the sensors detect an obstacle, meaning I could fly the drone forwards and all the way back to me, patiently waiting. Now, I wish I could have said that that one example was an isolated incident. However, that is not the case, because later on I was flying using the mobile phone stroke app only for this same thing to happen all over again. And for me, this one is a little bit more serious. As you can see, the fog has cleared up a little bit, certainly not enough fog or mist for me to think that there would be any sort of problems flying in this mode. However, as you can see, once again, it is like the drone is hitting an invisible wall in the sky. No matter what I did, flying in manual mode, pushing that virtual stick as far forward as I could, this drone simply would not move forward. For some reason, it was saying there was an obstacle underneath us, which of course there absolutely was not. I tried to raise up to mitigate that. It still would not fly forward. Tried to come back down. It would not come any further forward again. A real serious issue. Now, in the end, I did manage to land the drone where I could just go and retrieve it. However, for me, this is a much more serious situation. The reason is because when we are flying it using the mobile phone stroke app, there is no way to disable these obstacle avoidance sensors, essentially meaning that whilst I was lucky, I was over flat ground and able to retrieve it. If I'd flown my drone using the mobile app control over a situation where I could not then get to it, essentially if these obstacle avoidance sensors were stopping the drone from flying towards me, essentially the drone would just hover and sit there until it ran out of battery and potentially landed in a situation where I wouldn't be able to retrieve it. That is really not good at all. So moving swiftly onto problem number 2, where this problem raised its ugly head once again whilst trying to demonstrate a return to home scenario. Now, if you are unaware, when the DJI Flip return to home is triggered, either due to low battery or failsafe or indeed user activated return to home, it automatically, even if we are flying in sport mode, it enables the obstacle avoidance sensors to stop us running into an obstacle on its way back to the home point. Now, in this situation, this is where the problems really started, because as the drone decided to rise up to its return to home altitude I'd set in the DJI Fly app, it came with some pretty bad timing, because just at the time of activating that, the thickest bit of fog, funnily enough, decided to come over the drone, basically meaning the drone was ascending into some pretty thick fog. As the drone got to its predetermined return to home altitude, instead of making any sort of forward momentum, it decides to start flying backwards completely away from us. And of course, at this point, because it's ascended into that fog, we have pretty much lost our visual line of sight. You can see the distance is getting further away from us. So thinking pretty quickly, I then cancelled that return to home, meaning that would then disable the obstacle avoidance sensors on the front of the DJI Flip, basically meaning that I could then manually control it, bring it back underneath the fog and all the way back to the home point. So that was a pretty scary situation, but just shows you how you can easily mitigate this situation if you find yourself in one. Now, because I was eager to demonstrate a return to home situation on the DJI Flip in my review video, I decided to just wait this out a little while to give the fog a little bit of a chance to clear. Then I flew the drone all the way back out to try and recapture what I'd originally intended to do. Now, of course, I was aware of the fog around, so what I did is I went into the DJI Fly app and lowered my return to home altitude to a much more lower level, meaning that if it did rise to demonstrate the return to home, that it wasn't going to rise quite as much, so hopefully the fog wasn't going to affect us. However, as I activated the return to home, oh boy was I wrong again. The camera does make the fog look pretty bad. I can assure you it actually wasn't, and I did have eyes on it at all times. Again, it was just sat stuck in the air. However, rather than cancelling it because I had eyes on the drone, I just decided to just wait it out and see what would happen. And then for some reason, something I've never seen on a DJI drone, it's actually self-cancelled its return to home and just basically sat there and hovered. This deactivated the sensors so I could physically fly the drone all the way back to me to discontinue the flight. So why am I making such a big deal and advising that you could potentially lose your drone due to the infrared sensors on this DJI Flip not working very well in foggy conditions? Well, quite simply because whilst I've shown how to mitigate this situation by either not using return to home or making sure you are in sport mode, which means the infrared obstacle avoidance is turned off, should we find ourselves in a situation where we become disconnected between the controller and the drone and we have got no way to actually cancel that return to home due to a loss of signal and the fact that we cannot switch it then into sport mode, essentially we could find ourselves in a situation where the drone could be over a cliff, a mountain, or even over water. And the fact that the drone, again, similar to the last mode we spoke about, could simply just hover there, unable to make any sort of forward momentum back to the home point. It would just simply hover until it ran out of battery and descend either into a situation where you could not retrieve it, or even worse, into the water where you are never going to see this drone again. Now, for added context, in the DJI user manual, flying in fog is listed as a definite no-no, and it's not something I would generally do. However, flying DJI's other models in conditions similar to this in the past, it's fair to say with those other obstacle avoidance systems, I have never had an issue like this where the drone has simply refused to move due to the overpowered obstacle avoidance system. However, it's worth noting that this is not unique to DJI and especially the Flip. A few years ago, Autel Robotics launched a drone called the Autel Nano Plus that had a similar problem that was very well documented, that it would just pick up obstacles mid-air and refuse to fly. So it does happen, but I do think a lot of it is down to the infrared sensor that has been chosen as the main obstacle avoidance sensing system on the DJI Flip. Now, for a bit of research, I have looked on Google to see if I can find any articles to support the fact that the infrared system on this might be affected by fog, and actually I found this little passage. Yes, infrared can cause issues in fog as the water droplets in fog scatter infrared radiation, significantly reducing the range and clarity of thermal imaging cameras in foggy conditions, meaning even though infrared can penetrate fog to some extent, heavy fog can still significantly limit its effectiveness. Now, for me, I wouldn't say anything that I was flying in would be deemed as heavy fog, as you saw throughout this video. However, it seemed certainly enough to affect the sensors on this DJI Flip. So the reason for me wanting to bring you this video is just to highlight this potential issue to make sure you are not caught out like I was, and how you react in this situation, but most importantly make you aware that, these things can happen and could eventually result in a flyaway situation if you happen to be flying in a situation where you could not retrieve your drone and the drone was unable to make any sort of forward momentum, especially in a fail-safe return to home situation. Now, it would be very easy at this point to say just turn obstacle avoidance off and don't use return to home. Sadly, that's not a realistic situation, and of course, by turning those off, it limits the effectiveness of the point of this drone, which of course is certainly marketed at the beginner market for those where generally they will rely on the obstacle avoidance capabilities of drones just like this. So hopefully this video has made you aware of this potential issue. And a little side note, if you are the type of person that likes to fly your drone above the clouds to capture those brilliant above cloud shots, well, you might not want to do it with the DJI Flip. So if you found this video useful, please do give it a big thumbs up. It tells the YouTube algorithm more people just like you might want to watch my content. Subscribe to the channel for more drone related content just like this. And until next time, thank you very much for watching. See you again soon.